Well, Syrian army spokesman says the Air Force has carried out nearly 120 airstrikes against terrorist positions across the country since Sunday. The spokesman said that the airstrikes hit more than 440 targets in Damascus countryside, as well as several cities including Hama, Homs, Idlib, Aleppo and Deir al-Zawr. He added that the airstrikes in Deir al-Zawr destroyed a convoy of vehicles, most of them equipped with machine guns. The Syrian army, backed by Russian airstrikes, has stepped up attacks against terrorist positions over the past few weeks. The army has managed to gain significant ground against ISIL and other terrorist groups in different areas, especially in Aleppo province. Meanwhile, warships from Russia's Caspian Sea Fleet have fired 18 cruise missiles at ISIL positions in Syria as part of Moscow's campaign against the terrorist group. The Russian defense minister says the missiles hit their 7 targets in Raqqa, Idlib and Aleppo provinces. Sergei Shoigu added more than 600 terrorists have been killed in the strikes on Deir al-Zawr province. He also noted that the main objective of the Russian aerospace force is to weaken the financial and economic foundations of ISIL. The defense minister went on to say that terrorists in Syria have lost $1.5 million per day as over a dozen oil storage and processing facilities and hundreds of fuel tankers have been destroyed. Meanwhile, Russian media have quoted President Vladimir Putin as saying that a new phase is needed in the battle against terrorists in Syria to cleanse terrorist groups and protect Russia from possible terrorist attacks. To get more insight into that story, we're joined via Skype from Illinois by Robert Naiman. He's the policy director of Just Foreign Policy. Thank you, Robert, for joining us here on Press TV. Well, what do you think Russia can do to ISIS that a coalition of 60+ countries couldn't? And what do these achievements on the ground in Syria reveal about the sincerity of the US and its allies in the battle against ISIL?
Well, we'll see. You know, every country that conducts airstrikes always says that they're wonderful. We'll see what these developments mean. But one thing I think is significant is that not only the Russians, but also, according to their own account, the U.S. has, and apparently perhaps also the French, the U.S. definitely is saying that it has stepped up its airstrikes against ISIL oil facilities, ISIS oil facilities, saying that these are the source of more than 50% of ISIS's revenues. So some people are saying that the Russian intervention is putting pressure on the U.S. to increase its targeting on the oil facilities. I mean, clearly we've had a series of events. The attack on the Russian plane, the bombings in Beirut, the Paris attacks that are increasing pressure on many countries to put their focus on ISIS. And there's increasing pressure in the West, both on France and the United States, to put ISIS first in terms of their focus as opposed to the government of Syria. That's happening in Paris, and it's also happening in Washington.
Well, Robert, you're talking about Russia actually bragging about its achievements, saying that, OK, since they're doing the airstrikes, they're claiming it's been successful. But let's look at the facts on the ground. The fact that ISIL actually grew under US bombing. They were not a force to be reckoned with. 4 years ago, nobody had heard about ISIL. All of a sudden, they're the boogeyman in town. They're coming to get us all. So what does that tell us about the ineffectiveness of the United States and its allies, NATO, and all these European countries bombing Syria?
Well, clearly, aerial bombing is not going to displace ISIS. I don't think anybody thinks that it will. And as in every similar air campaign, while clearly the U.S. can kill ISIS fighters with bombing, U.S. bombing is also a recruitment tool for ISIS. So people who are killed are replaced. I wouldn't be any more optimistic about Russian bombing than I would be about U.S. bombing. And of course, we have to be concerned with any aerial bombardment about civilian casualties, particularly when the countries, and this applies to Russia as well as the United States, don't have troops on the ground in the place where they're doing the bombings. So they don't really know who they're hitting. So I think for every country, whether it's the US, France, or Russia, we should be skeptical about claims that something wonderful has been accomplished by bombing without seeing what the effects were afterwards.
Well, it was great to talk to you. Robert Naiman, the Policy Director of JAS Foreign Policy, joining us from Illinois.